Om Hari Om, Om Hari Om, Om Sahana Vavatu, Sahano Bhunaktu, Saha Viryam Karavavahai, Tejasvina Vaditamastu, Ma Vidvishavahai, Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Om. May the Divine Being look over us lovingly as a mother and father. May the Divine Being support and nourish us as a mother and father. May we have the strength and skill to study together the art of spirituality. May no misunderstandings arise amongst us. Om, peace, peace, peace be unto thee, to thy children, to us, and to all beloved everywhere. Hari Om Tat Sat. Well, good evening, namaste, everyone. Welcome to our Wednesday evening reading and discussion of the book Realizing God, which is a collection of the talks of Swami Prabhavananda from the 1930s through the 1970s, early 1970s, gathered and edited by his beloved disciple Edith Tipple, or Nalini. So we're just, I understand, as I recall from the last reading, we just have 2 pages left of the introduction. It was a long and involved introduction. Those of you who have the book or want to seek out the book, it's worth you reading the entire introduction. But with that, I will introduce our beloved reader, Haima Naidu, and she will start where she left off with the introduction. Thank you, Haima.
Sure, Brother Shankara. Good evening and namaste, everybody. And we are on page 23 of this book, Realizing God. That is on the top. I will start from the top of the page. Even though I read once, I feel like that is the way where should be the best to start. God is. That's where I'm going to start, Brother Shankara.
Wonderful.
Okay. God is this tremendous proposition, though variously interpreted, is of course common not only to the religions of India, but to all religions of the world. In every age, God-men have proclaimed it, each according to his own spiritual vision. And in every age, people have asked for proof that it is true. Many plausible demonstrations have been devised by philosophers, establishing God as a logical necessity. However, there is not a single argument substantiating God's actuality on the basis of reason which has not been contradicted by equally plausible arguments of opposing philosophers. The only real proof that God is must be sought elsewhere. God can be realized. That is to say, he can be known, felt, experienced immediately in the depths of one's own soul. Upon this all-inspiring fact, the religions and philosophies of India, without exception, have been founded. From the dim ages of the Vedic seers down through the many centuries to our own day, it has been consistently declared that the ultimate reality of the universe can be directly perceived, though never in normal consciousness. To the unique transcendent state in which the miracle happens, various names have been given: Turiya, Samadhi, Nirvana. To realize God is the supreme goal of human existence. On this, all Indian religions and philosophies have at all times been agreed. Arise, awake, approach the feet of the Master and know that, says the Rishi of the Katha Upanishad. Study of the scriptures is fruitless, says the great Shankara, so long as Brahman has not been experienced. He is born to no purpose, says Sri Ramakrishna, who, having the rare privilege of being born a man, is unable to realize God.
Repeat that assertion of Sri Ramakrishna, please.
Sure. He is born to no purpose, says Sri Ramakrishna, who, having the rare privilege of being born a man, is unable to realize God. It will be observed that the call for tolerance, harmony, and universal consent applies only to the paths, not to the goal. The Upanishads say, neti neti. The Atman or Brahman within is not this, not that. In that ecstatic realization, says Sri Ramakrishna, speaking out of his own abundant experience, all thoughts cease. No power of speech is left by which to express Brahman. If this were all, there would, of course, be no religious doctrines, no religious philosophies, but it's not all. The mystics, sooner or later, emerge from transcendental consciousness, and then it sometimes happens that they talk not for their own sake, but for the good of their fellow human beings. In talking, they may express variously the same ultimately inexpressible truth. The seers and philosophers of India, as elsewhere, have defined God in many ways, often apparently contradictory. Hence, divergent denominations have arisen. But what is arisen? Sorry. Hence, divergent denominations have arisen. But what is to be noted is that seldom, if ever, do the differences in doctrine lead to intolerance, let alone to persecution. On the rare occasion when a system of philosophy or religion tried to prove and establish its own truth at the expense of others, it could not get very far. It could never dominate the minds of the people of India as a whole, as thoroughly ingrained in their hearts was the spirit of understanding and sympathy. After all, they felt it was saintly life that counted. Saints and sages have been produced by following the order of Shankara, but also by following the order of Ramanuja, of Madhava, and of others. And they are recognized as such, not only by their particular followers, but by the whole of India. Moreover, by natural extension of their liberal attitude, Hindus revere the saints and sages of religions other than their own. The first systematic attempt to harmonize the many doctrines of Hinduism is to be found in the teachings of the Bhagavad Gita, the Bible of the Hindus. By the 5th century BC, many schools of thought with varied ideas of God and the Godhead, as well as varied paths, had come into existence. These were all incorporated in the teachings of the Gita. Sri Krishna says, whatever path men travel is my path. No matter where they walk, it leads to me. After many centuries, when Hinduism came for the first time into contact with a foreign religion, attempts were made by two great teachers, Guru Nanak and Kabir to harmonize the newly arrived Islam with the native faith. And more recently, when confronted by Christianity, Hinduism has once more, especially by the precepts and practices of Sri Ramakrishna, continued its role of peacemaker among the creeds. It is perhaps natural, in conclusion, to emphasize strongly the age-old effort of India to reconcile differing faiths. For it is probably by continuing this effort on an international scale that she is doing most for the spiritual welfare of humanity. To bring together against rampant evil the great religions of the world is no doubt a gigantic task. But it is one for which India has a special qualification. She strives for unity, not by calling for a common doctrine, but only by pointing to a common goal and by exhorting men and women to its attainment. The path, she assures us, matters little. It is the goal that is supreme. What is the goal? It is only, once again, to realize God. That's the end of our introduction of this Renaissance.
Thank you.
Brother
Thank
Shankara.
you for that very, very capable reading. Now, is there anything that anyone would like to comment on? Or is there any concern or question that you would like to raise about anything that was said in this very long and detailed introduction to what is titled Renaissance of Vedanta. And of course, Swami Vivekananda's mission to the West was very much profiled right there at the end.
Mhm.
His presentations at the Parliament of World Religions in September of 1893, and then later very much spoke to this harmony of religions, not one doctrine, not one universal religion, but a true harmony of religions based on attainment of the goal of all religions, which is this realization of God, realization that one's true original nature is divine. So anything else from anyone before we plunge into what comes next? All right, dear, please read on.
Next is concepts, and it talks about religion is the heading. As you all know, there is ferment today in the religions of the world. Not merely a ferment, that is to say, agitation in the minds and hearts of people, but a rebellion, especially among the younger generation. Where all this will lead is anybody's guess.
Now remember, these are words spoken by Swami Prabhavananda. This is what Swami Prabhavananda said when he delivered a talk from the podium, usually at the Vedanta Society of Southern California, sometimes at Santa Barbara. But this is what he said. So I'm going to ask Haima to begin again.
Sure, Brother
So
Shankara.
you can have that firmly in mind, that these are the words actually said to us. They weren't meant just for the people in the audience where this Swami spoke. They were meant to last. So,
I will.
meant for us.
Start from the beginning. Religion is the heading. As you all know, there is a ferment today in the religions of the world. Not merely a ferment, that is to say, agitation in the minds and hearts of people, but a rebellion, especially among the younger generation. Where all this will lead is anybody's guess, but I firmly believe that ultimately it will lead to true spirituality and mysticism as exemplified in the lives of the great teachers of the world and in our present age in the life of Sri Ramakrishna and his disciples. You are well aware of how drugs have become widespread among the younger generation. What is the motive behind it? They are dissatisfied with present conditions, with their present consciousness, and they think mistakenly that drugs will lead them to some transcendental experience. But I can tell you with personal authority that drugs may give people some visions, but they are not spiritual visions and have nothing to do with ecstasy or samadhi. Furthermore, they do harm to the brain, sometimes permanently, whereas ecstasy and mysticism, in their true sense and value, transform the lives of those who have them.
Now hold on just for a moment.
Please, Brother Shankara.
These words were said and these observations were made because a lot of what were called hippies were coming to the center in the 1960s. And a lot of the older generation of devotees that had been there from the 40s and so on objected to this. And so the Swami said, no, these young people are our future. And he, of course, commented accurately, as he said from his own personal experience, that these drugs would not do what they want, but some few of them would, in fact, persist and find a true spiritual path and a teacher. So that's the context in which the Swami was speaking. And of course, he wasn't speaking that way in the 1930s, but he was speaking that way in the 1960s, which is where these words come from. All right, Jaime, please read on.
Sure. I must point out to you the gradual changes that have come in the West from a historical standpoint. The predominating characteristic of modern Western civilization can be summed up as the scientific spirit, rationalism, secular humanism, which can be traced back to classical antiquity. It was the Greek mind that laid the foundation of natural science. Everything must be tested and experimented and reasoned. This is fundamental to Greek civilization, and it is the principle of the modern West. The Greek mind concerned itself with the natural man as he is known to himself, his bodily desires and mental powers. Of course, in Greece, we also find Pythagoras and Plato, who were great mystics, but they did not and could not exert much influence on the Greek mind. Later, we come to the two great religions of the world, Judaism and Christianity. They made fine contribution to Western thought, the chief one being the insufficiency of reason or intellect. They insisted upon historic revelation. Both religions stand on revelation. That is, God reveals his will and his law to his prophets and lawgivers. All religions, of course, are based on revelation. Reason is insufficient. It cannot reach high enough. Religion is not against reason and scientific observations, but religion transcends them. Then again, when righteousness is practiced on authority without experimentation, and experience of the truth of God, what happens? Fanaticism, narrowness. Fanaticism, in the words of Vivekananda, is a sort of disease in the brain. As you all know, in the name of religion, there have been great wars, killing, murder, all kinds of diabolical acts. With the coming of the Renaissance, there came intellectual and scientific advancement, but traditional religion was thrown aside and morality declined. Today, in whatever remnants we have of Christianity as existing Catholicism and Protestantism is a rebellion against creeds and dogmas and doctrines. On the one side are conservatives, on the other liberals, and they're coming to a point when they again reassert the scientific spirit and rationalism, secular humanism. The present chaos of the world has brought us to a period of rethinking. In every country, thinkers are beginning to look with suspicion on the past and present way of life and are asking, are we traveling the right path? How can we live in peace and harmony? That is the predominant thought in the minds of the present young generation, who have reached the point where, with only darkness, destruction, annihilation, we must reconsider and readjust. Now let us consider the East. From a beginningless past, the religions of India have also been based upon revelation, but not upon the authority of the revelations. In the words of the great Sikh philosopher Shankara, in matters relating to Brahman, the scriptures are not the only authority. There must be personal experience. It's not enough to believe in God. Practically, there's no proof for the existence of God, but God is. He can be known and experienced. You find so many definitions of God, and they all quarrel about the nature of God. Sri Ramakrishna used to say, go to the neighborhood of God, realize God, then you will realize that his name is silence. Nobody can express that experience in the sense in which we compare experience.
His name is silence.
Silence.
We don't find silence in our chatterbox minds. We find silence once we turn within. This is where we find the silence. When we sink into that silence, this is the process of spiritual discipline. As Swami Dhyana Yogananda pointed out this in one of his talks, devotion is discipline. To be devoted is to be disciplined. And so if we have devotion to the idea of the knowledge of God, to know God is the purpose of human life, then we turn within. We know neti neti. It's not this, not that in the outside world. So we turn within, and slowly, we sink into silence. This is the name by which God goes. This is the language that God speaks. And it is not intelligible to the finite mind and cannot be expressed in speech, but it is expressed in behavior, change in behavior. As we realize these truths, these deeper truths, it changes our behavior. Slowly and slowly, we become that which we truly are. We manifest our true original nature. So any comments or questions about any of that? All right, dear, please read on.
Nobody can express that experience in the sense in which we compare experience. You may have had a wonderful, blissful experience and live in that joy. But what kind of joy? What kind of bliss? We try to compare it with sense experiences, but there is no comparison because it is not a relative experience. It is the experience of the absolute reality. I'll read this one more time, Brother Shankara. Nobody can express that experience in the sense in which we compare experience. You may have had a wonderful, blissful experience and live in that joy, but what kind of joy? What kind of bliss? We try to compare it with sense experiences, but there's no comparison because it's not a relative experience. It is the experience of the absolute reality. Then again, Sri Ramakrishna pointed out that before the bee sits on the flower and begins to suck the honey, it makes a big noise. But as soon as the bee begins to suck, it becomes silent. Then, having drunk and becoming intoxicated, it makes a sweet humming sound. So we find that these great prophets, great mystics, great teachers of the world who have come face to face with God try to express God. They experience the same reality, but their expressions differ. Matthew Arnold defined religion as ethical life with a touch of emotionalism. But if righteousness is practiced on authority, because such and such prophets ask us to behave and live in such and such a way, it does not work. When we realize what the purpose of life is to realize God, then we shall know that the good or righteous is that which leads us to Him, and evil is that which leads us away from Him.
Please read that again.
Sure.
Starting with Matthew Arnold. Matthew Arnold was a philosopher, and he took it upon himself to minimize religion, as we'll see in his remarks. So start with Matthew Arnold.
I will. Matthew Arnold defined religion as ethical life with a touch of emotionalism. But if righteousness is practiced on authority, because such and such prophets ask us to behave and live in such and such a way, it does not work. When we realize what the purpose of life is, to realize God, then we shall know that the good or righteous is that which leads us to Him, and evil is that which leads us away from Him.
So it's a simple formula. Righteousness is that which leads us toward the goal of God realization. Evil or unrighteousness is that which leads us away. Now, it's a very simple formula, but very difficult to observe in practice because our lives are so full of activity and the doings of the relative and the finite plane. So hard to discern what is it that is leading us toward and what is leading us away. This is why a daily spiritual discipline is required, daily devotion, because then we're able to see more clearly in that framework of what it is that we've been instructed to do. We see that yes, this leads me toward. When I don't do that, or I do something else, I tend to drift away. Any comment or concern or question from anyone? All right, dear, please read on.
We have to reach a stage when, like the jasmine flower giving fragrance without knowing that it is giving fragrance, we become so holy that we do not think what is right or what is wrong, but what we do is right. As civilization moves in cycles up and down, religion moves up and down. At times, people have tried to read the scriptures without trying to experience or realizing the truth of God. But whenever religion declines, when truth becomes forgotten, a great teacher comes not to give anything new, but to reinstate what we call Sanatana Dharma, the eternal religion. Nobody founded the truth. When you say Christ is the founder of Christianity or Buddha is the founder of Buddhism, you are wrong. Christ discovered the eternal truth. Buddha discovered the eternal truth. Just as there are laws of science, does the scientist invent or discover? There are eternal verities of life. The great ones discover them. They want us to discover those truths for ourselves. In the present age, when India came in contact with Western civilization, the idea of Western civilization was to drink wine and eat beef. Religion degenerated. So Ramakrishna and his disciples came. I had the blessed opportunity to meet his disciples. You could not call them Hindus or Christians or Buddhists or Muslims. They were men of God. Sri Ramakrishna was a Hindu. He was Christian. He was a Muslim. His chief apostle, Vivekananda, pointed out that he was the embodiment of the truth of all religions.
Now, when Swami Prabhavananda said that he met the direct disciples of Sri Ramakrishna, of course, he didn't meet Vivekananda. Vivekananda left the body in 1902. But he did, in fact, his guru, his teacher, was Swami Brahmananda, Rakal Maharaj, the spiritual son of Sri Ramakrishna and Holy Mother. That was his teacher. And he knew others of the direct disciples that were still alive when he first came. Swami Prabhavananda came to this country first in 1925. He was sent here. He first came to be an assistant in San Francisco, then went away and started the Portland Center, and then was asked to come and start the Hollywood Center of Vedanta Society of Southern California. And this was very soon after some of the direct disciples themselves had been in Southern California. Swami Turiyananda, for example. But it was a rich soil in which to plant this young organization. And of course, it became the largest Vedanta society in the West, the Vedanta Society of Southern California, and remains so to this day. Swami Sarvadevananda is tending to it. It's unimaginable, the burden that he's bearing. So, if there are no other comments or questions, please let's go on.
As civilization moves in cycles up and down, religion moves up and down. At times, people have tried to read the scriptures without trying to experience or realize the truth of God. But whenever religion declines, when truth becomes forgotten, a great teacher comes not to give anything new, but to reinstate what we call Sanatana Dharma, the eternal religion. Nobody founded the truth. When you say Christ is the founder of Christianity or Buddha is the founder of Buddhism, you are wrong. Christ discovered the eternal truth. Buddha discovered the eternal truth. Just as there are laws of science, does the scientist invent or discover? There are eternal verities of life. The great ones discover them. They want us to discover those truths for ourselves. In the present age, when India came in contact with Western civilization, the idea of Western civilization was to drink wine and eat beef. Religion degenerated. So Ramakrishna and his disciples came. I had the blessed opportunity to meet his disciples. You could not call them Hindus or Christians or Buddhists or Muslims. They were men of God. Sri Ramakrishna was a Hindu, he was a Christian, he was a Muslim. His chief apostle, Vivekananda, pointed out that he was the embodiment of the truth of all religions. Thomas Carlyle once observed that a man's religion is the chief thing about him. But Carlyle did not equate religion with the joining of churches and recitation of creeds. Religion is the ultimate concern of human life. Otherwise, there's no meaning to life. Religion gives you the experience, the realization of God, the truth, ultimate reality. This is not only the idea of the Indian sages and seers, nor is it only a new idea with Ramakrishna and his disciples. If you go to the source of any religion, you will find all the great teachers have pointed out that you have to know the truth for yourself. Jesus said, "Ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free." And Buddha said, if there were not an unconditioned and uncaused something, how could there be any escape from the caused and conditioned? Muhammad said about the people who only study and quote scriptures, they're like asses carrying a burden of books. And Shankara, the seer philosopher of India, gave almost the same comparison. An ass carrying a load of sandalwood does not get the fragrance. Let us hear some of Sri Ramakrishna's teachings on the essential identity of the great religions. He said, so many religions, so many paths to reach the same goal. I have practiced Hinduism, Islam, Christianity, and in Hinduism again, the ways of the different sects. I find that it is the same God towards whom all are directing their steps, though along different paths. The tank has several guts or approaches. At one, Hindus draw water and call it jal. At another, Muslims draw water and call it pani. At a third, Christians draw the same liquid and call it water. The substance is one, the names differ, and everyone is seeking the same truth. Every religion of the world is one such gut or approach. Go with a sincere and earnest heart by any of these guts, you will reach water of eternal bliss. But do not say that your religion is better than that of another. Go with a sincere and earnest heart by any of these guts, you will reach the water of eternal bliss. But do not say that your religion is better than of another. Abraham Lincoln once said, I cannot without mental reservation assent to long and complicated creeds and catechisms. If the church would ask simply for assent to the Savior's statement of the substance of the law, thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, with all thy strength, with all thy mind, and thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. One more time I'll read.
Yes,
Abraham Lincoln once said,
Abraham Lincoln.
Abraham Lincoln once said, I cannot, without mental reservation, assent to long and complicated creeds and catechisms.
Catechisms.
Catechisms, yes.
Catechisms.
Catechisms, thank you. If the church would ask simply for assent to the Savior's statement of the substance of the law, thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, with all thy strength, with all thy mind, and thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. Swami Vivekananda summed it up with these words: do not care for doctrines, do not care for dogmas or sects or churches or temples. They count for little compared with the essence of existence in each man, which is spirituality. And the more that is developed in a man, the more powerful he is for good. Earn that first, acquire that, and criticize no one, for all doctrines and creeds have some good in them. Show by your lives that religion does not mean words or names or sects, but it means spiritual realization. Only those can understand who have felt. Only those that have attained to spirituality can communicate it to others, can be great teachers of mankind. They alone are the powers of light. The question arises, what about humanism? Repeating the words of another great teacher, compassion for all beings, Sri Ramakrishna pointed out, compassion. Compassion. Isn't God dwelling in every being? Serve God, worship God in all beings. And Swami Vivekananda happened to listen to that conversation. He came out of the room and said, if I live, I will give this truth to the world. Service to humanity in the spirit of worshiping God. In other words, secular humanism is transformed into spiritual humanism. Scientific temper and rationalistic spirit are not opposed to religion and revelation if by religion we understand experiment and experience. Intellect and revelation become harmonized. Humanism becomes spiritualized. The proof of the reality is not in the vision of the seers and prophets and sons of God. The proof of the reality is not in the scriptures of the world. They are only guideposts. The proof lies in the fact that each individual can discover this very same truth. Philosophy or religion is experimental. My master often used to say that until you have reached that realization, you are still on the outskirts of religion. Religion begins with the spiritual vision. You are a philosopher. You become truly religious only when you have the direct vision, direct experience for yourself. You cannot understand the beauty of the moon by looking at it through others' eyes. You have to see the moon for yourself. That reality, God, Brahman, Allah, whatever name you may call it, who is known as the source of knowledge, of happiness, remains a mere concept, a mere theory, until you have come face to face with that reality, until you have the direct vision of God. In other words, to be a philosopher, to be a spiritual person, is to be a rishi, a seer. Now we must understand that this experience is not of the senses, nor is it merely intellectual understanding, nor an emotional experience. It is transcending the senses. It is transcending this impure mind. My master often used to say that vision is achieved only when the mind becomes purified and subtle, not with the gross mind. Sri Ramakrishna used to say that this world is an illusion and it remains an illusion until you see the reality. When you see the reality, this world also becomes real. The appearance has no meaning. It is all in a flux, but you find meaning in this flux when you see that unchanging, absolute reality underlying it. If we sum up the whole principle
Now, read that again because this solves the problem.
sure.
If we understand what is meant here, it solves the problem of Maya. Maya is constantly changing, and it is always in flux, as the Swami says. So this is the formula that he gives. Of course, it's not unique to him, but it is his summary of it. So please read that again.
Sure. Sri Ramakrishna used to say that this world is an illusion and it remains an illusion until you see the reality. When you see the reality, this world also becomes real. The appearance has no meaning. It is all in a flux, but you find meaning to this flux when you see that unchanging, absolute reality underlying it.
So that which gives rise to Maya is the underlying reality. Maya is the apparent reality. But as Sri Ramakrishna said over and over, there is no difference. Maya and Brahman are one and the same, just in two different conditions. Water still, water and waves, same water. Anything else? Anything from anyone? All right. Now you'll notice there isn't much interruption here for these kinds of little side notes. The reason being, there was no interruption during the time that the Swami gave these talks. And there's very little reason, except when I see that there may be something to add that will help you understand the context that the Swami is speaking from. But there's very little reason to interrupt the Swami here. He developed these talks so thoughtfully and so carefully.
If we sum up the whole principle of religion, at the core, we find a few fundamental principles. First is that behind this appearance of a universe of name and fame, the universe of mind and matter, there is an underlying reality which Maestro Eckhart called the divine ground and which the Upanishads call Brahman. Without or apart from that reality, the universe is non-existent. It is Maya. Another principle is that the individual has a double nature, just as the universe has a double nature, the appearance and the reality. When you see the reality, you see the meaning of the appearance. The double nature of a human being we call the phenomenal ego and the divine self, the Atman. This Atman is one with Brahman, one with the reality. In other words, in each of us, the infinite God is dwelling, and this phenomenal ego is only an appearance covering that divine ground, Brahman, the reality. The next point is that we are capable of directly experiencing this reality. It's possible for every individual to experience. And the purpose and end of everyone's life is to attain this knowledge. The conditions are the methods and means by which this attainment is possible will be understood simply if we can understand what the obstruction to that vision is. The power is of transcendental consciousness, which is inherent in every one of us. It's not a special gift of a few individuals, but is innate in everyone, only it lies in a dormant state. What causes the dormant state is the phenomenal ego that we accept as real. The moment we accept it as real, we are thrown into the appearance of the universe, and the reality remains hidden and unknown. If you study the disciplines as taught by all the great teachers of the world, you will find that the purpose behind all discipline is to free oneself from the phenomenal ego. That is the one aim. To a Christian mystic, or a Buddhist mystic, or a Hindu mystic, whatever religion one may follow, the principle of discipline is to free oneself from all selfishness, all sense of ego. There are people who might not believe in religion, but there is none in this world who does not believe in being unselfish. And the very principle of spiritual life is to become completely unselfish. In the words of great poet Kalidas, to own the whole world by disowning your own self. That is the fundamental principle. What causes all troubles and sufferings and miseries in this world is selfishness, ego. It is the root cause of all our sufferings, individual, national, collective, or universal. There is a universal ignorance that exists, the phenomenal ego, and there is the attempt to enrich this ego. Sri Ramakrishna used to say in a very simple way, as long as the servant is in the house and managing the house, the master remains away. It is the same with us. The servant ego has mastered this whole being, and so the master is away and we do not realize God. Let the servant ego be the servant, realize its own position, and then the master begins to rule. That is the principle. If you go to the source of every religion, you will find the same teaching, and that is love the Lord. When that love comes, the love for mankind becomes normal and natural. There's no distinction felt between man and woman, between race and race. The world will not be saved either by Hinduizing everyone or Christianizing everyone. But we must all join hands together and try to spiritualize all people. Every religion has dreamed of an ideal of universality. Let me point out in this connection what kind of universality the Hindu dreams of. Swami Vivekananda, an apostle of Sri Ramakrishna, said, if there is to be a universal religion, it must be one which will have no location in place or time, which will be infinite like the God it will preach, and whose sun will shine upon the followers of Krishna and of Christ, on saints and sinners alike, which will not be Brahmanical or Buddhistic, Christian or Muslim, but the sum total of all these, and still have infinite space for development, which in its Catholicity will embrace in its infinite arms and find a place for every human being. It will be a religion which will have no place for persecution or intolerance in its polity, which will recognize divinity in every man and woman, and whose only scope or form will be centered in aiding humanity to realize its own true divine nature. Vivekananda and all the apostles of Sri Ramakrishna saw in him the embodiment of such an ideal universality. This does not mean that all people will have to accept the personality of Sri Ramakrishna, but the principle, the ideal for which he stood. That the ideal is to be realized. For instance, Sri Ramakrishna said once that he did not belong to India. Another time he said, I have my children in far-off lands, whose language I do not know. From a common sense viewpoint, we find that all religions have a tremendous life power in them. But for one of these great religions has died, they are still living because each of them has the truth. Oh, I think I need to read this one more time. I read it wrong, Brother Shankara. For a common sense viewpoint, we find that all religions have a tremendous life power in them. For not one of these great religions has died. They are still living because each of them has the truth. Vedanta and Buddhism, the most ancient religions of the world, have both recognized always, from a beginningless time as it were, the liberty of all humanity in regard to religion. Swami Vivekananda says in this connection, it has been approved to the world that holiness, purity, and chastity are not exclusive possessions of any church in the world, and that every system has produced men and women of the most exalted character. In the face of this evidence, if anybody dreams of the exclusive survival of his own religion and the destruction of others, I pity him from the bottom of my heart and point out to him that upon the banner of every religion will soon be written, in spite of their resistance, help and not fight, assimilation and not destruction, harmony and peace and not dissension. Do you not see what's happening today? I would say that every existing church will have to recognize this truth, or it will die out. It cannot live. Sri Krishna, centuries back in the Bhagavad Gita, pointed out, I am the thread that runs through all these pearls. Each pearl is, as it were, a religion, and the Lord God is the thread that unites them. Brother Shankara, we have 2 minutes left. Would you like to make any comments?
No, I think we'll just leave it at that.
There.
Just mark it there.
Sure.
Thank you very much for noting the time.
Sure.
Is there any comment or question or concern from anyone else about anything that's been read or said? Anything that you would like to add? Again, so glad to have had all of you here. This is a small group. Perhaps it will grow as people come to understand what it is we're actually experiencing. As I said, these are words that were said in usually either one of two places, the Hollywood Temple and the main campus of the Vedanta Society of Southern California, or the Santa Barbara Temple. These were the two main places that Swami spoke. He didn't travel much. He sometimes spoke at Trabuco, sometimes, well, Trabuco was about the only other place he spoke. So, may you all be well and in bright spirits. Jai Shri Guru Maharaj Ki Jai. Durga, Durga, Durga. May we be safe. May we be healthy. May we have peace of mind. May we be cheerful. And may we go forward in the secure knowledge that we are in the loving and protective embrace of the Divine Being as our Mother and Father. So until Saturday, of course, on Sunday, this visiting Swami is speaking. He'll speak in the chapel. And then on the following week, I'll speak. And I'll speak on this topic of mother worship. It's coming into the season of mother worship. So,
Brother Shankara,
yes, dear.
I have one comment. Our Wednesday link still shows us Bhagavad Gita is our reading. Maybe that's why majority of our people didn't show up, our regulars. I'm thinking maybe that needs to be changed by Cindy. I lost my cell phone, lost Cindy's number. I couldn't contact her. So
Where is it said that it's Bhagavad Gita?
have our Tuesday, Wednesday, Saturday links. That Wednesday link still shows Bhagavad Gita.
I'll tell her that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Just wanted to make a comment because our regulars didn't show up today. I was kind of wondering what happened. Maybe that is the link. They thought still we finished it.
Okay.
Okay.
Very
nice
good.
to meet you. Thank you so much. It's going to be a great group, I can tell. Thanks, Yohaima, for
Well,
telling me about
thank
it.
you so very much for joining us. Yes, it is.
Thank
Our
you.
congregation is remarkable. There's no two ways about it.
Group, really.
Really.
So until next time,
Okay.
See you later.
Jai 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 Ma.
Okay.
Bye, Mom.